Podcast with Sheila, the podcast that is spreading positivity around the world by sharing inspiring life experiences. With me today is Brian Hite. He's a stuntman, performance psychologist, keynote speaker, and the author of Begin Again. If you're looking for some inspiration, then this is the right platform to be. So grab your warm drinks and let's kick the ball rolling. Hello, Brian, and welcome to Podcast with Sheila.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great. Let's just kick it in. What made you switch from stunt work to psychology?
Well, I didn't switch from stunt work to psychology. I'm still a stunt man and I do psychology. And I write books and I'm a faculty member at a university too. I do all kinds of things.
Great. It looks like you're a man with many hats. So, how did stunt work start for you?
You know, I was struggling in college. I was I don't know, just in my world the expectation was you go to high school and then you go to college and then you get a job and this is what you do. And I hated school like always from the minute I stepped foot in it the first time. But that's what you did, and so that's what I did. And I went to college, and for the first 2 years, just like I said, I just struggled. I was floundering. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. I had no idea what job I wanted, and it was stress. It was stressful and anxiety provoking, really. And then I ended up going to see a stunt show at a Six Flags at a theme park in New Jersey, and that was it. I mean, I saw what those guys were doing. I couldn't even believe it was a job. And luckily I knew the company manager of the show and I was able to go backstage and talk to the people and they told me what I needed to do to get the job and I did it. I went to the audition and I got hired and I did that show the summer after that. So this is the summer after my junior year of college, my third year of college. And my life completely transformed. I it was the best summer I ever had in my life. I mean, it really was. It was for the first time, I think, in my life. Really, I had direction. I felt like I had a purpose. I felt like I had an idea of where I belonged, and I wasn't just out there flapping, kind of caught in the wind with whatever. And and that was a really cool feeling except that I still had one more year of college, and I didn't care anything about it. The only reason I was at college was because I was told I needed to be in order to get a job. But now I'd figured out that that there was a job path for me that didn't involve college at all, which was also a revelation that had blew me away. And so it was really hard to focus, and so I didn't. Quite frankly, I nearly failed everything the first semester, and then was for sure failing everything the second semester. So I dropped out. I dropped out of college the first time around, and did the show one more summer, and then moved to Los Angeles to get into film and TV. And that's what I did. And it wasn't until 5 or 6 years later that I decided, you know what, I think I do want to finish this degree and go back, but it was on my terms. And that's the thing that was missing the first time around. I felt like I was forced to go to college. I felt like that was just what I had to do. Whereas when I went back the next time to finish that degree and then to continue with a master's degree and a PhD, all of that was my choice. It was because I liked the material at that point in my life. It was the right thing for me to do, and that made all the difference in the world. And really it's one of the reasons why I have focused on motivation training, motivation and burnout as much as I have, because I just experienced the challenges in that area so much for so long that I really, any help that I can give to anybody with regard to that, I'm happy to do it.
Great. I'm happy that you've gone into that direction, but hold your thought. I'm coming back to you. I see that we have audience on all the platforms. I'd like to say welcome everybody who's joined us. If you're listening to Brian this evening, you can send your questions in and I'll answer them. I'll send them to him when the time comes in. But Brian, just as you were speaking about continuing education, for some reason, I thought you were not going to continue. But when I read your brief, I saw that you had a PhD. So I was going to ask you how you didn't feel like continuing education when you were younger, but then you were able to follow through to have a PhD. What changed or what inspired you to want to do that?
Well, it was just the material. At first it was just I missed learning, and then and that's what brought me back to the first degree. But then the master's degree really came from coaching gymnastics. I was coaching kids, And it amazed me when I took them to competitions and they performed like completely different people. So at practice, I knew what they could do. I was practicing with them every day. I knew what their capabilities were. And so when I got to the meets, I should have seen the same thing, but I did not. Not in many cases. I would see kids who were great in practice just completely fall apart at the competitions, and vice versa. I would see kids who were lackadaisical or screwing around or made a lot of mistakes in practice, but they got to the competition and they nailed it. And there's no other reason for that I could come up with other than mental, other than what was going on inside their minds. And that power of the mind to affect how we perform and how we act and what we do, that's such an incredible power. And it just really it just really drew me in, and that's why I continue to pursue the education and to really start working toward that master's degree in sports psychology. Well, and then I wasn't done learning. I mean, I finished that one and I continued on with a PhD in organizational psychology, and it was just an interest. I never expected to work in that field. Certainly never expected to own a business that did anything in that area. I was going to do stunts for the rest of my life. But life does what it does. Next thing you know, I'm doing sport performance psychology stuff for the U.S. Army. Who knew? So from stunts to that, and then back to stunts again, and then back to the Army again, and now I've got my own business. So you never know what life's going to give you. You never know at what point in your journey is the right time to when something's going to come up where a shift is what you need to do.
Yeah.
We can't predict that. We don't know who we're going to meet tomorrow. We don't know when the next opportunity is going to come up. We just have to stay open to those opportunities and those chances and recognize them when they come so we can take advantage of
Great. Um, Phil, I think that you are trying to send a message through. If you type it out, I'll be able to read it out. But as he's speaking, I would not like to interrupt him just to get the flow. So just type in your message and then I'll send it to him. I'm not ignoring anybody here. It's just the way we want things to be so that we all enjoy the podcast. Um, I'm coming back to you. How have Eastern and Western philosophies shaped your life and work?
Yeah, that came out of a really dark time in my life. I was dealing with some problems with alcohol. I was going through a divorce and just struggling with work. I didn't feel like I belonged where I was. And and coming out of that, part of my process was to read. And I tried to find as many wisdom texts as I could. I read religious texts like the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, just from different religions. I read philosophical texts from ancient philosophy with the Stoic philosophers, right on up to new philosophers today, Sam Harris I'm forgetting I'm blanking on the guy's name, the Daily Stoic guy. But anyway, it did. I just did everything that I could to soak in information and to soak in wisdom. And whenever it was that I came across something in one of those books that struck me, that really, I don't know, it hit home for whatever reason, I wrote it down on a sticky note, and and then each of those sticky notes became an essay, and then 186 of those essays became a book. So the what really happened throughout the writing of that book was a couple things. One is I was surprised at the similarities of many of the ideas between Eastern and Western philosophies. And then the second thing that surprised me was how much, I mean, stuff from thousands of years ago aligned with research done last month. I mean, it really, the theories that we have today, it's pretty amazing to me, at least, how much they align with those ideas that were put out by Aristotle and Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, and I mean, it just, the list goes on. It really, it was interesting to me. So that's why, the Eastern Western philosophies, I read from all of them, and each of them had little nuggets that I took away that I could apply in my life, and that's what I wrote about, and that's where that book came from.
Great. It's like basically in life, when people are going through a lot of things, they tend to different things. Some people, like you said, reading, others tend to cooking. But there's one thing that you pointed to that intrigued me, turning to philosophy. Why philosophy? Why wasn't it anything else? Was it something you were looking for, some information you felt would help you come out from the kind of challenge you were going through? What was it that led you that direction?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I've always been interested in deep things and in exploring stuff at a level that goes beyond the surface,
Yeah.
and really asking some of those hard questions. That's always been interesting to me, to read about it, to think about it, to talk about it. Religion has been something that I've looked at, and just, I mean, really looked at a lot and read a lot of stuff about. I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in God. I am an atheist at this point in my life. Now, that wasn't always true, and so that's kind of been a journey in and of itself. But when you start looking at the Eastern philosophies, and comparing the two, there's not really two, but comparing the different ways of viewing things from different parts of the world at different points in time, I guess exploring those questions from different angles is what I was trying to go for. If I'm not just going to read one person's thing and understand
Mm.
what their position is, I want to read somebody else's stuff and what they think about it too, and see where there's some overlap, and just see what speaks to me. And so much did. So much overlapped, and so much spoke to me, that it was really, I don't know, it was something I just really enjoyed learning about.
Very great. What's the biggest mental barrier people face, and how do you help them overcome it?
Wow. I don't know that there is a biggest mental barrier that people face, but there are certainly some common ones. And there are a couple that I talk about regularly, and that's stress and pressure. Sometimes people think about them as the same things, but they're not. They're two different things. Each is crippling in terms of our performance and well-being. So understanding where they come from and how they operate, and what we can do to eliminate them, not lessen them, not deal with them, not perform alongside them, like some people like to think. My case is that no, they're always bad. They are never helpful, and we need to get rid of them. And I mean, there are reasons why I say that, but stress and pressure are two big ones. And then one we've already talked about too is motivation. It is, we all have bad days. We all have days that we wake up in the morning and we don't feel like doing whatever we know we need to do. Those days come all the time, and sometimes they come in large chunks, and we don't know if those times are ever going to end, and that can be a really challenging time as well.
Great. I'm happy that you've settled on stress and what was the other word? It was two things you had mentioned:
Yeah, stress and pressure.
stress and pressure. And those two, I think it can really cripple your life. I think I'm at the point where I'm going through it. So when you mentioned it, I kind of was able to relate to that, because then I know there's no way you can say I'm dealing with it. You just, like you said, you just have to make sure you've killed it completely and not say you're managing it, actually. Because lately, for me, my way of dealing with it, because I know there's no way I can kill it completely, even though that is what I want to do, because I have so much on my plate. And I begin to think now, putting one job on the side and thinking, let me take some time off. And then it's needing your attention. And when you go back to it, is the job on its own has increased and is piling up and all of that. So what I do sometimes when I just get too much of it, I just put everything on the side. Whatever it is waiting for me. I'm going straight to bed, or I'm just getting a comic book or film to watch, and then just try to wind down. But if that is helping me, to a point, but I don't think completely, because I always still feel stressed, no matter how much sleep I've had. And I was telling somebody recently, it's like when I go to bed, my brains are still working,
Hmm.
like you're turning the wheel and the wheel never stops, even though I'm trying to sleep. It's that bad. And I know it's bad because I've kept it going for a long time when I had to break at some point. And I've only taken small chunks of breaks, but not, I feel I need like maybe 6 months break from everything. I feel I'm there, where a day, a night, 2 weeks is not enough, because I try to do that, but I still feel there's more that needs to be done. Uh, In your case, what can you say to something like this? Because I believe a number of people are going through this kind of stress with the kind of economy we are going through and everything else with life changes and everything. What can you say as an advice to somebody like me going through things like this?
Yeah, well, stress. The way that I think about stress is through the lens of a theory called the transactional model of stress. It's been around for a long time, and essentially it just says this: that stress comes from two things. One is that we perceive a situation as a threat.
Hmm.
Second is we believe that we don't have sufficient resources to deal with that threat. So stress comes when we are in a situation and we think something bad might happen to us, but we aren't capable of dealing with it.
Yeah.
That's where stress comes from. So stress is about the situation itself, how we look at it and how we view ourselves in relation to it. So one key is to stop looking at situations as a threat and start looking at it as an opportunity. Because even if things go the way we think that they're gonna, or the way we want them to, or they don't, either way, we're learning, we're growing, we're developing, we're improving. We 100% can come out of any situation better than we went into it. And that doesn't mean that we want to experience what we call bad stuff, or, I like to think in terms of pleasant and unpleasant versus good or bad, because there are certainly some things that are pleasant and I enjoy experiencing them and I'd love to experience them again. And I come out of those things better than I went in. But there are some unpleasant things too, like I mentioned before, the problems with alcohol, divorce. I don't want to experience any of that again, but I came out of it better than I went in. So it's the good bad, I think, is the wrong way of looking at situations. I think a better way is just pleasant, unpleasant, but more importantly, how are we growing through the experience? So if we can just remind ourselves that no matter what the situation is, no matter what the outcome, we're going to be okay. And not only okay, but better for having gone through what we did, that can take some of that threat away. Now, on the resource side, there are a lot of resources that we have. We have physical resources, mental resources, emotional resources, social resources, financial resources, spiritual resources. We have lots of resources that we can draw on. And I don't think that we're very good, a lot of times, at really recognizing what our resources are and bringing them fully to bear in every situation. So I think we can grow a lot and we can improve a lot by just simply asking ourselves, we're just doing a little bit of exploration in terms of what are my resources? What are my strengths? What am I bringing? And maybe where are my weaknesses that I can start to develop intentionally, deliberately, to try to cultivate these resources so that when I'm in these situations, I'm better off. For example, the world is full of lonely people now. The research is very clear that the number of close connections that people have with others is dropping dramatically. And the research is also clear that if there's nothing, straightforward about resilience other than this is clear. We have to have other people. Other people matter. We are human beings, we're social creatures. The relationships that we have, the belonging that we feel, the connections that we develop are essential to our performance, our well-being, everything about our lives. So we might find ourselves in a situation, for example, where maybe we're so busy with work, we're neglecting those relationships. We're not spending as much time with our spouse or family. We're not reaching out to friends that we used to hang out with regularly. We're losing those connections.
Yeah.
So if we recognize that, we can be intentional about really just setting aside time to call somebody that we haven't talked to in a week or two, or to go actually meet somebody for lunch or for coffee that we haven't seen in a long time. So we can do these different things that help develop the resources and really allow us to bring them to bear in those situations. That can reduce stress tremendously.
Wow. I like the bit where you said we have to be intentional about it. And I think that if anybody's listening to us, that is one key thing that technology is taking away from us, is making us lonely by the day. And I think the world is moving at a very fast pace as well. So it's difficult for people to catch up. And in trying to catch up, then we neglect old cultures and traditions that really kept us sane in those days. Like you say, in the world we live in today, the man is coming in, the woman is going out because they work different shifts. So there's nothing like proper relationship. And this is affecting a lot of marriages, and divorce rates are going high and children are suffering. So there's a lot of ripple effects from some of these things you've mentioned. But I love the fact that you are dropped in that we have to be intentional about some of these things if we want to see change. That's great. How did you build resilience through career changes and setbacks?
Well, I mean, for me, and this kind of gets back to your case a little bit, is I recognized that for me, I was experiencing a lot of stress because I didn't like what I was doing, because I wasn't really, I felt like, well, there's a couple things at certain points. One was I didn't feel like I was a good fit for the place anymore. Now, once upon a time, I was a great fit for the environment that I was working in. But after 5 years or so, I had changed, it had changed, and we'd kind of parted ways. And so the threat, I guess, if you want to think about it in terms of the theory I just said, was going into a situation where I'm not aligned with what's happening, where my drive, my desires, my goals aren't aligned with what the organization's is, and there's friction there, and that doesn't feel good. So for me, that's the threat. I have to go into this environment every day where this friction is going to happen, and it's not a pleasant situation. Um, so the resilience around that for me was recognizing it, and trying to change my environment, being very clear about what I wanted, where I fitted, where I fit, where I wanted to go, and then try to create the conditions for that. Now, many of us, and I was one of them, can't just drop what it is that we're doing whenever it is that we want to go run off to whatever our dream is. But we can be very, very conscious of what it is that brings us joy. What are the things that we really enjoy doing? Now, and then pull as much out of that from our jobs as we can. And it would vary from job to job how you would do that. And that's what I tried to do. I tried to create a little bit more freedom in my roles. The teaching that I did, I tried to expand it with a little more information that I had gleaned, and pulled in my stories from my life. I tried to personalize it a little bit more. So on a resilience side, it's really, resilience is a math equation. It's the number of resources we have available and can bring to bear versus the number of challenges that we face. The more resources we have, the better able we're going to be able to deal with those challenges. So really, for me, it was eating better, it was trying to sleep more, like what you're talking about. It was exercising regularly, it was getting a hobby. I didn't have a hobby for a long time. There was nothing that really brought me joy. So I started pulling out the juggling balls again, and the juggling clubs. I do that. I do card magic. So I always have a deck of cards around. I've got one right now. So you can just take,
Oh,
boom, then you just change it, just like that. I know that's what I do. So just things that are hobbies for me. And my dirt bike, going to ride the dirt bike. So that's another thing that really, people will, they make excuses. I'm too busy. I don't have time. I can't. You have to make time. It's like an investment. I mean, we can only push ourselves so long before we just run out of energy. We're finite creatures. We have a finite amount of energy. So we have to rejuvenate, we have to replenish. And how we replenish isn't necessarily sleep or rest. We don't have to be horizontal and unconscious. Replenishing can come from those things that just give us joy, those hobbies, people that we love, the friends and family that we have. Even just watching a show. My One of my favorite things in the world is to sit down with my fiance at the end of the night, and even if it's just for 1 hour, or not even an hour, it could be a half hour. We just watch one episode of a sitcom, of a funny show that allows us to laugh and not have to think about anything. But we're connected in that thing. We can talk, we can hang out, we can relax. It's one of my favorite things in the world. It gives me all kinds of joy. So resilience really is about building those resources, and bringing them out. And part of that is just understanding what feeds us, what gives us that drive, and really replenishes the energy that we've expended.
wow. I think there's a lot of things I'm going to take out from what you've just said. And it all boils down to being intentional if you want to see change, basically, because when you had said that you and your fiancé have to sit down, even if it's 1 hour, watch something humorous and then forget about everything. It's just making up your mind that at this point, this is what we want to do because you are looking at achieving this result. And I think that is where most of us struggle because it's a decision we don't want to take because we're looking,
Yeah,
yeah.
don't, because we think that we're wasting time. That's the thing, is we've been taught culturally that if I spend time practicing card magic, or I spend time juggling, or I spend time watching a sitcom, I'm wasting time. I could be getting something done, and I should be getting something done. But you know what? You are getting something done. You 100% are. I mean, and even aside from psychomotor skills of juggling and magic, I mean, there's just the emotion, the joy, the losing of yourself that replenishes really critical aspects of ourselves that we have to have if we're going to continue on moving in whatever direction we're trying to go with work, whatever we think we should be doing, or taking the kids and taking them to the practices for whatever it is we're doing. All of that, we have to take time to rejuvenate. And so if we can change our perspective from, no, I shouldn't do this, I feel guilty about doing this because it's wasting time, I should be doing these other things 'cause I know they need to be done. Man, you know what? It reminds me of what you were talking about earlier too. The list, it never ends. Like, we never get to the end. We never complete all of the things that we have to do. That it just keeps recycling. So at some point, we have to choose to stop, and then we'll pick it up later on with where it left off. And not only is there nothing wrong with that, that's the only way to do it. There's no other way. We will never finish. So we can't keep saying, all right, I got to keep going until I get done. You're never going to be done. Just choose to stop, recognize when you need that replenishment, replenish in the ways that work for you. Maybe it's meditation, maybe it's reading a book, maybe it's taking a hike, whatever it is, but do it, because you're going to come back better. And by better, I mean you're physically going to feel better, you'll have more energy. Mentally, you'll be better. You'll be able to focus, concentrate, process cognitively more efficiently. Emotionally, you'll be better because you'll be able to regulate those emotions. You won't be as volatile. You won't lose your temper as quickly. And socially, you'll be better because of all the other three things I just said, you can now interact with other people better. So we're
Wow,
better on every level.
great. How has your definition of success changed over time?
My definition of success, that's a great question, because that is one of the first things I ask clients when I start working with them, because many of them will have definitions of success that are very much out of their control. And so for me, my definitions of success, it's not so much what they are, but how I conceptualize it. And I really try to think about success as, in terms, if it's going to be a thing that's measurable, that's objective, that's out in the world, I try to do it in terms of what I can control, the things that I can influence. So for example, if I'm working with an athlete and their goal is, I want to place in the top 3 at this competition, well, that's not in your control. It's just not, because other people are going to be competing. You can't control them or how well they do. It's just not. But the things that you can do that will create situations where it will make it more likely that you will achieve your goal, that for sure is in your control. So I try to identify those things. But even more than that, here lately, I've been focused more on how I want to be rather than what I want to do. So I define success in terms of how well I've lived up to my values. So for me, I want to be more compassionate. I want to be more empathetic. I want to be more patient. I want to, like, there are just certain values. I want to be more focused. Uh, these are just things that for me matter, and they may not matter for everybody, but they matter for me. So for me, success is living my values. It's not so much what I achieve or what I don't achieve, or how many boxes get checked off of whatever. It's just, how did I approach the day? If I approach the day in a way that aligns with my values and who I want to be and how I want to be, then that's success. Regardless of what all the outcomes are that happen along the way, I lived the way I wanted to live, and so I was successful that day. That's where I'm at now.
Great. In as much as I would like us to continue, time is really not on our side. What would your final message be to our listeners as we wrap up?
Opportunities are everywhere. They're everywhere, and they happen all the time, and we just have to do 3 things in order to take advantage of them. One, we have to even be aware of that they're happening. We have to open our minds up, open our awareness up, stop being so fixated on, like what you were talking about with success. No, I want this. This is success. This is what I have to do. No, broaden it out. Like think more broadly. Just open yourself up to other possibilities. The second thing is being flexible enough to shift away from our goals. Like I thought I was going to go right, but turns out I should go left. Be willing to do that. Shift from right to left. Every day we meet new people, we have new experiences. We're not the same today that we were yesterday. So why should we expect those to stay the same over however long? Reevaluate and be willing to shift. And then the third thing is, and this is where so many people get tripped up, we have to have the courage to take that first step into the unknown, into this new space, into this place that we're unfamiliar with and we don't know what's going to come from it. We have to have that courage to take that first step. So being open to the possibility that something may happen, being flexible enough to let go of what we've been holding on to for so long, and then having the courage to take that first step in a new direction. That's opportunities and how to take advantage of them. And I don't know. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that really helps. But I'm tempted to ask if you'd like to talk about your book again, Begin Again. If you'd like to share some more light on it and how people can grab a hold of it and what actually inspired it, if you can sum it all up briefly before
Yeah.
we close. Yeah.
Earlier, begin again, utilize the wisdom of Eastern and Western ideologies to achieve your full potential. You can find it on Amazon. It is the product of my own work. It's the product of my own healing, of my own growth, and in a tough time where I I I just read and I tried to absorb as much wisdom as I could. And as I was doing that, some things became clear to me. And a couple of them were that Eastern and Western philosophies had a lot in common. And the second was that the science that we're going by today is also aligned in many, many cases more than I thought with that with both philosophies, Eastern and Western. So thinking about, I think for me, it's the realization was that we're not separate. There's not that we're not separated by time and we're not separated by parts on the globe. We're all experiencing life and we're all experiencing challenges. The details are different, but the main things are the same, and we're all struggling with the same questions and coming up with answers. And I just there's a level of connection that I felt when I was reading these different people throughout the millennia that I don't know got at any time. So that's the inspiration for.
Great. We would like to say a massive thank you, Brian, for coming on podcast with Sheila today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed the discussion.
Great. And to everybody who was able to join us briefly, would like to say thank you as well. I see some hellos, highs, and I also see good interview on this podcast. All the kind words, we really appreciate them and we say thank you. If you're listening to us for the first time, this is Podcast with Sheila, the podcast that shares inspiring life stories through this channel. This is season 2, episode 117 of our podcast series where we bring seasoned guests to share inspiring life experiences with us. Do not miss any of these lovely experiences. Subscribe and be notified when a new episode is released. Whilst at it, please drop us a rating. We have an audio presentation of this on all podcast London sites. Just search for Podcast with Sheila and you'll find us. Our prayer for you this week is that you become an agent of change. Until we meet again, have a brilliant evening. Thank you very much. Bye.